Hey there, welcome to X News 3. If you want to stay up to date with the latest in global news and analysis, make sure you follow X News 3 to catch this and all our future videos. And don't forget to support us by subscribing, liking, and dropping a comment below. We really appreciate it. Japan just gave Ukraine a game-changing eye in the sky. Japan has just given Ukraine an all-seeing eye in the sky, and it's going to completely change how Ukraine fights its war against Russia. Putin is shaking in his boots. And for good reason. Thanks to Japan, Ukraine can now strike Russia harder than ever before, and it all comes down to three words: Synthetic Aperture Radar, or SAR. On April 22nd, Japan announced it had approved the sharing of satellite intelligence with Ukraine through its SAR satellites. This information will add to the satellite imagery and data Ukraine is already getting from other countries, marking a major shift in Japan's support for Ukraine. According to a report by the Voice of New Ukraine, this is a significant first step in military cooperation between Japan and Ukraine. The data will come from the Japanese company IQPS, whose systems are now integrated into Ukraine's military intelligence platforms, specifically used by Ukraine's Defense Intelligence, or HUR. These systems will provide battlefield imagery with detail Ukraine has never had before.
Putin is not happy about this, you can be sure of that.
So how does it work? To understand that, we first need to talk about what synthetic aperture radar actually is.
According to ICYE, SAR works differently from traditional satellites.
Most standard satellites orbit Earth with powerful cameras that take pictures, but they're affected by weather. If there's cloud cover, a regular satellite can't get a clear shot of the ground. Even when it does, the images often aren't detailed enough to identify specific vehicles or equipment.
SAR changes everything.
ICE explains that SAR sends radar pulses from a satellite down to Earth. These pulses bounce back and are used to build high-resolution images, and they work regardless of weather or darkness. This means SAR can see through clouds, fog, or camouflage.
YouTuber Wes O'Donnell described SAR as being like sonar for satellites. The images it produces aren't just clearer than regular satellite images, they're also more current. By comparing SAR images of the same location over time, analysts can spot changes, like tire tracks shifting or vehicles moving under cover.
Thanks to SAR, Ukraine can now see practically everything happening on the battlefield in real time. That makes it one of the most powerful tools in Ukraine's arsenal. Russian troops can't hide anymore. Not their vehicles, not their movements, and not even behind bad weather. Ukraine now has a sky eye that tracks everything as it happens. And that means Russia gets hit back every time it tries to act.
As for how Japan developed this technology, it's all about innovation. SAR isn't a new concept, but it's been expensive and difficult to use. Traditional SAR satellites can weigh over 2,200 pounds and are costly to launch. But Japan's IQPS solved this. According to the Japanese government, IQPS is one of only 5 private companies in the world that has successfully developed and launched much smaller SAR satellites. Each IQPS satellite weighs just 220 pounds, costs far less to make and launch, and still captures ultra-detailed images with a resolution of just 18.1 inches, sharp enough to identify specific vehicles, tents, and military gear. With SAR, Ukraine can identify all of this in any weather, clear skies or blizzards, day or night. And soon, IQPS will have even more satellites in orbit. In March, Rocket Lab successfully launched another SAR satellite for IQPS and confirmed that this was just the first of 8 planned launches. 6 are scheduled for 2025 and 2 more in 2026. Add to that a separate SAR launch in December 2023, and Ukraine is on track to have around 10 of these powerful imaging satellites by the end of 2026. And that's not even the worst news for Russia.
Japan isn't the only country giving Ukraine SAR access. According to United 24 Media, Ukraine is also working with Germany, Italy, and Finland to receive SAR imagery. Finland is providing access to ICE's technology, the same company we've been referencing, which is also actively supporting Ukraine. But Japan's support stands out. The other countries have been supplying Ukraine with military aid from the start of the war. According to the Kiel Institute, Germany has committed 18.44 billion euros, mostly in military assistance. Italy and Finland have given less, but still contributed significantly, 1.59 billion and 3.17 billion euros respectively. The European Union itself has donated more than 138 billion euros, with another 122 billion in pending support, more than the United States has given.
Japan, meanwhile, has taken a different route. It's currently Ukraine's fifth largest donor, behind the United States, the European Union, the United Kingdom and Germany. But until now, nearly all of Japan's support was non-military. It gave $1.74 billion in humanitarian aid and about $10.6 billion in financial assistance. Now, Japan is sending satellite images knowing full well they'll be used for direct military action. That's why Putin is so alarmed. It's not just that SAR is powerful, which it is, it's what Japan's decision means for the future of Ukraine's war effort.
This SAR support is part of a growing trend. Japan is steadily increasing its military support for Ukraine.
Since the war began, Japan has slowly but surely aligned itself with Russia's enemy.
In 2023, Japan chaired the G7 and kept Ukraine's needs front and center. Then Prime Minister Fumio Kishida even made a historic visit to Ukraine, the first by a Japanese leader to a war zone since World War II. In February 2024, Japan hosted the Japan-Ukraine Conference for Economic Growth and Reconstruction, where over 50 cooperation agreements were signed between the two countries' public and private sectors. Then in August 2024, the Polish Institute of International Affairs reported that Japan became the first non-NATO country to sign a bilateral security agreement with Ukraine. This deal included non-lethal weapons, humanitarian and economic aid, and a promise to deepen cooperation on shared security issues.
More recently, on April 16th, United 24 Media reported that Japan is supplying 30 more military vehicles to Ukraine, 6 of which were already delivered by April 10th. This is on top of the 101 Mitsubishi Type 73 light vehicles Japan had already donated.
While Japan continues to stick to providing only non-lethal equipment, these vehicles clearly have military use.
And the support keeps coming.
On May 8th, Japan gave Ukraine advanced tools designed to inspect damaged transport infrastructure. These tools are critical. Every bridge, road, and rail line destroyed by Russia hurts Ukraine's supply chain. Being able to assess the damage is the first step to fixing it. The big picture? Japan is clearly becoming a more committed and valuable partner to Ukraine, and Russia is running out of places to hide. A country that has long tried to stay neutral during global conflicts is now throwing its full weight behind Ukraine, and that's bad news for Putin.
It means a key player in the Indo-Pacific now sees him as a threat that must be dealt with.
Japan recently gave Ukraine access to synthetic aperture radar satellites, marking a major shift in their relationship.
Thanks to this tech, Russian soldiers are going to die. Japan may not be supplying the weapons used to kill them, but it's ensuring Ukraine gets all the intel it needs to make its strikes as effective as possible.
This brings us back to the idea of more on that in a moment we mentioned earlier. Japan's growing support for Ukraine, with SAR being the latest example, signals a country undergoing a cultural transformation.
As Wes O'Donnell put it in his video, this isn't just some empty gesture. Japan's never done anything like this before. Not for the US, not for NATO, not for anyone, but they did it for Ukraine. Why? Because Russia's war is rapidly changing old traditions.
And he's not wrong. We've already seen how those old traditions are shifting in Europe, where NATO recently agreed to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP. Militaries across the continent are preparing for what some see as an inevitable war with Putin's invading forces.
But Japan is separated from that war by entire oceans. There's little reason for Japan to fear a Russian attack on its mainland. It could have easily stayed out of it, like it has many times in the past. But it didn't. Instead, as O'Donnell points out, Japan is letting go of its old ways. Once content to remain neutral, Japan is now evolving into a military heavyweight. Its support for Ukraine is just one sign of that shift. There are plenty of others.
As GIS correspondent Riley Walters wrote in a May 27th article, Japan may be separated from Russia by water, but it's still a neighbor. It's also next to China and North Korea, both close allies of Russia and serious threats to Japan in the Indo-Pacific. Walters noted that Japan has stood by and watched China grow and modernize its military. Meanwhile, North Korea, still somewhat isolated, has started forming security partnerships with Russia. Put all these emerging threats together, and Japan has a strong reason to rethink the post-World War II security policies it's followed for decades. One major result of this rethinking is Japan's new national defense strategy.
This strategy shifts Japan away from decades of passive defense and toward a more proactive approach designed to deter potential threats. That shift comes with a significant increase in defense spending. In 2023, Japan spent $48.2 billion on defense. In 2024, that jumped to $55.3 billion, the largest annual increase in Japanese military spending since 1952. Japan's pacifist Article 9, which says the country will never use war as a means of defense, is becoming more symbolic than practical. After all, there's no reason to buy 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles from the United States for $2.35 billion unless you're preparing to use them if necessary, against countries like Russia, for example.
Japan has also been active in building up its security partnerships.
Alongside its recent security deal with Ukraine, it has signed mutual access agreements with countries like the United Kingdom, Australia, and the Philippines. The United States remains a key ally as well. Walters pointed out that Japan and the US have stepped up their talks on deterrence, particularly around extended nuclear protection. These talks are now held regularly between high-level officials, including ministers and national security leaders. The point is simple. Japan is no longer just a silent partner offering humanitarian and financial aid to Ukraine while avoiding deeper involvement. True, Japan still hasn't sent weapons to Ukraine, but it's clearly preparing for the possibility. And it might not be long before it sees Russia as such a major threat that it starts supplying arms, along with support gear like vehicles and intelligence from its growing SAR satellite fleet.
Speaking of those satellites, let's now return to what Japan's decision really means for Ukraine. Finally, thanks so much for listening. Be sure to follow X News 3 and stay tuned for future videos. And hey, don't forget to subscribe.